welcome along to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David.
My name's Matt.
And we are the Taylor Bros.
Happy days are here again.
Yes.
So today is a very special episode.
For us, I mean, probably maybe other people might not mind as much
Yeah,
as us.
numerically not so, but on the date-wise, this is as close to the 2-year anniversary as we can get.
Yeah, so 2 years of recording the Make It Count podcast.
Yeah, we launched at the very end of September 2021.
Yeah. So, you're still with us maybe, or maybe you've recently joined us.
Yeah, if you have, welcome along to the party.
Do you want to give us a brief summary of what the Make It Count podcast is all about?
It's not the Make It Can't, it's the Make It Count podcast.
It's about perfect English.
The Make It Can't. I can't do it. It's actually the complete opposite of that. So we live in a noisy, distracted, scattered world where there's lots of forces that are driving us to lives that maybe we look back on and we go, I just missed it today, or I missed it last week, or where did that year disappear to? And we want to be people that live with intention and purpose. We recognise that's not easy. We're also not perfect at it. So the Make It Count podcast is us just having interesting discussions, conversations where we think this is a topic that's important and purposeful and powerful, but we're not the expert in the room. We're journeying. We're going on this journey together. We've spoken about a lot of key practices that we have been implementing, new things that we've been trying out, and we've been finding helpful. And we've heard back from other people, ideas on podcast topics and episodes, and where it's been making a difference in their lives. So I'm enjoying this, and we're still enjoying this journey. When we started, we had this piece of advice from an experienced podcaster that said, you've got to get a list of at least 40 episode ideas down. And if you can do that, then you've got enough to start. Well, we got to 40 and we were still going. And we did probably another 20. We're like, okay, that's probably enough for now. We can just hit pause on ourselves. But we've got a lot of things that we still want to talk about, and we want to invite you guys in on that journey as well.
Yeah, so for us, I think it's about stopping the drift and living intentionally. And that's what making it count looks like. It's not about achieving necessarily, but it's about intentionality.
Absolutely. In the words of Stephen Covey, it's beginning with the end in mind and putting the first things first. So part of what it looks like, make it count, is to go, well, what is important for me? That was last week's episode. What are the top 5 for the year? If you don't know that, you can't really say whether you made it count or not. Exactly
that. And we've talked about Stephen Covey. We've done a whole series on sort of his habits.
Very good series.
It's an essential series. You could say.
We could link to that in the show notes.
And it is, some of his themes come up a lot in what we talk about. Some of the other things I think come up quite a lot is just this idea of thinking a little bit longer.
Yes.
It's thinking a little bit further. Thinking that helps us set that compass point, so that we can live a bit more intentionally. So we can think, well, what is actually truly important? How do I really make this count? So we've done it for 2 years, Matt.
Yeah.
Any major reflections?
One of the things that I suppose I've reflected on, mentioned it in that introduction as to what the podcast is about, is we are not the experts sitting in the room saying, I've studied this and I know what you should do. It's very much, we're putting things into practice. We're trying things out. Some things we've tried and have adapted. Other things it's like, see, that didn't really stick with me, and so we just talked about it. It was an interesting topic and we've moved on. But there are definitely some aspects where it's like, I'm now putting into practice new things that I wasn't doing a couple of years ago. New ways of journaling, new ways of thinking about the future, the next 3 months, the next year, that I wasn't before. And I hope that in years to come, that will show in that I am living more with purpose, more intentionally, and less maybe distracted and pulled by the whims of whoever the people are in vogue and influencing everyone.
Anything specific? You said a new journal prompt or a new way of journaling. Was there one in particular that you've trialed?
Well, again, so a couple of weeks ago we did the 3-month momentum planner, and that is now a literal book that you can get off of Amazon, which is great. But we've spoken about that a year or two ago, and you told me these are some of the prompts, these are the ways I'm doing it, And that changed the way that I was journaling. So you have some of these prompts in the morning, and then I also had a few that I was doing in the evening again. And that just lets you to go, okay, I'm going to plan out tomorrow. What are my top 3 priorities? Again, like limiting it to just a few. What are secondary tasks and things that have got to get done, but they're not with the priorities, they're just tasks? What are some meetings that are coming up? Then some space for blank journaling. Yeah, for often I have what am I grateful for today? Or maybe, how can I make today fun? Those sort of things. And in the evening, journaling about different things. We've spoken about that before. But for me, again, those practices, I've done journaling before. And often for me, it was just that five lines in the evening, the 5-year journaling. And that's great. But if I stay there, am I progressing, or am I just doing what I've done before? I really enjoyed the fact that it's now I'm progressing into more intentionality, and it's a bit of a planner journal. But that is a key one for me. It's like, oh, I wasn't doing that before we started the podcast. Now I am. And there's something about, as well, pulling back the curtain, we listen to the podcast. I am a little bit behind, but I really enjoy actually having that delay. We record, you then listen to it when you're editing it and you release it, but then when you come back to it a couple of months later, it's almost like an audio reminder. Oh yeah, I remember that now. I'm going to put that into practice. So we are very much on this journey. We're not just saying, here's what we do and you should do it. It's like, actually, it's a bit of a reminder. And that's why I want to be more open with, I actually haven't done that yet, but I really want to when that's the case. For example, the 25 from last week.
Yes, indeed. And I think a lot of people would say about me and probably about us that we were quite intentional anyway before we started the podcast.
Yes.
And maybe this is an expression of being intentional. The podcast has come out of that maybe tendency or development in ourselves. But I suppose through doing 2 years of the podcasting, it's become even more a part of myself, such that I was trying to think of like examples of how have I made it count in the last couple of years. That, doing this for 2 years, what does that look like now? Where can I say, oh yeah, this is how it's changed me? And I think it's actually deeper than that, because I'm not even really conscious of how that has impacted how I think.
Yes.
That I didn't consciously go, oh, I should do that, 5 focuses for the year. It just, I just knew that was the right thing to do because we talked about the idea before.
Yes.
And so it's become maybe a deeper part of assimilating into my patterns of thinking, which has been quite interesting and maybe a little bit unexpected.
Absolutely. I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Because, of course, one of the things that is true about us as humans anyway, and all the major companies know this, radio stations know this, ultimately, when it comes to new things, whether it's a song, whether it's a product, whether it's an idea, there does just have to be some level of repetition. You have to have touched on that idea a few times before we even give it a taster. That's why they play songs on the radio for free, because they know that once you've heard it 25 times, you like it, and then you're going to go and buy it or stream it in today's day.
I think the sort of academic research goes, you hear something once, and then it basically drops off. And so you need about 7 repetitions, but timed well as well. So it needs to be timed, and then you go back up, and it times, and then it goes back up. And, and actually that, like you said, that 7 touch points, it puts it inside you. So we probably benefit more than all of you from this podcast, but we want you to benefit as much, which is why sometimes we talk about these ideas more than once.
Absolutely.
Because they're things that we're wrestling with, and we're thinking, what does that look like in this context or in this context with my health, with my journaling, with my work, with my relationships? These are all important things, and so we cycle back to them regularly.
Hugely.
And maybe touch on a slightly different angle, or we have a slightly different story of that.
Or being in a different life stage, we have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. And I think that's also really useful as well, because like you said, there's journal prompts that I'm using now that I didn't used to use, but actually there are some journal prompts that I will use again in the future, and it's a different age and stage and a different reflection, because it's like, actually I want to focus on that now. For this year I'm focusing on these 5 things, but next year it might be a different thing altogether.
Yeah. So that's kind of the journey we've been on. That's a little bit about where we get help from this podcast ourselves. In terms of taking it forward, we haven't spoken loads about what the future looks like, but of course a big change that we've made in light of 3 of your top 5 for this year being those huge commitments is we've decided, from a practical point of view, we're going to shorten this episodes down to 10 to 12 minutes. Hopefully it helps you guys to connect a little bit more. It's a much smaller requirement to ask for 10 minutes of your time rather than 25. We know we live in a very full and busy world. We want to not be taking up too much of your time. But what do you think maybe the next year could look like in terms of making it count, or how could the Make It Count podcast influence the next year?
Well, for us, we've already talked about the benefits already, but we would love you to reap some of these benefits as well, have some of the rewards. We love hearing from you guys when you say, hey, this really helped, but what can I do with this?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
More of your questions to maybe guide some of these conversations.
Yeah.
As you said, we've got probably 100 ideas in our backlog of what we could do.
Exactly.
But actually, if you come and send us a request, that jumps to the top.
Absolutely. Yeah, it goes to like within the next couple of months, we'll try and put an episode out because it's like someone's got a question about this. So ask your questions or comments. And if you want to be on the podcast, hey, we're open for that.
Yeah, you're up for a 10-minute interview, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because we're not the experts in most things.
No.
Almost anything.
So if you've got something in your life that you go, this has made a big difference for me, get in touch and we'll see. What does it look like?
Potentially, a bit of informal coaching. You want to say, hey, I want to make it something in this area of my life count.
Yeah.
How can I do that?
Absolutely.
Informal coaching.
There you go.
Yeah. That's us for this week at the Make It Count podcast.
And for this year, 2 years rounding out. It's pretty exciting. 2-year-old birthday.
Woohoo!
Should have got a cake and 2 little candles.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Guys, see you next week.
See you next week.